Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome to another Star Wars Jedi Survivor video. Now the other day I made a video going over some of my favorite outfit combinations in Jedi Survivor, and a lot of you guys seem to really enjoy that video, and I got a number of questions asking me to do the same thing for lightsabers. So in today's video I'm going to be going over some of my personal favorite lightsaber combinations. Now, I'm not going to be showing the location of these lightsabers, I'm just going to be showing you guys some of the really cool lightsabers that you can build, and then if there's any individual parts to any of these lightsabers that you're missing, you can easily just YouTube it, because there's a tutorial for literally everything for this game. I found a lot of the lightsaber parts that I use in today's video just by watching tons of different tutorials found on YouTube. So the purpose of this video is to just showcase some of my favorite lightsaber builds, and hopefully give you guys some ideas or inspiration for your own lightsabers. So with that said, let's jump right into the list. So the first lightsaber that I want to show you guys is my Temple Guard themed lightsaber. I decided to go with all white and some gold. This lightsaber design reminds me of a Jedi Temple Guard. That's kind of the vibe I was going for here. But jumping right into the individual parts, the first part of this lightsaber is the Harmony emitter. And then for the vents, I went for the persistent vents. For the switch, I went with the Harmony switch. The grip is the persistent grip. Then I went with the Harmony pommel. Then I went with another persistence grip and another Harmony switch, and then another Harmony emitter, and then the Harmony pommel. So this whole lightsaber is basically just a combination of the persistence pieces and the harmony pieces. And then for the materials, for the primary color, I went with the warm metal, and I just picked one of the two gold options, and then I turned the polish down just a little bit so it wasn't too shiny. Then moving on to the secondary color. For the secondary color, I went with any sort of white. Here I went with the Jedi white color, but you can also use the Inquisitor white or the Imperial white. Any version of white will do, but I personally just picked the Jedi white. And then for the accent, I also went with some Jedi white here. That way both the whites match and go together. And then for the grip, I also made it Jedi white. And then for the condition, I like to keep it either pristine or well kept. And since I was going with a Temple Guard vibe, I feel like orange or yellow is just the best saber color to go with this hilt. So moving forward, the next lightsaber on our list, I wanted to go with kind of a basic look. This is mainly the Persistence lightsaber. I really like the colors here. I love the black and the gold and the silver all going together. So for the emitter, we went with the Persistence emitter. For the vents, I decided to go with Jaro DePaul because these vents have two different color schemes. It's not just all one color. It goes with both your primary and secondary color. So I really like having both the gold and the black on the vents. So that's why I went with those vents. For the switch, I used the Persistence switch, and then for the grip I went with the Duelist grip. The pommel is the Centauri Kree pommel. Then for the second grip I went with another Duelist. Then I went with another Persistent switch and another Persistence emitter, and then for the final pommel I went with the Persistence pommel. So I just really love the look of the persistent pieces with the Duelist grip. I think the Duelist grips really pull this piece together. And then getting into the materials, for the primary color option I went with the warm metal category, and I just picked any version of gold, but any bright yellow or gold version will do. Then for the secondary color, I picked the Imperial Chrome option. I just really like the look of the chrome, but any silver will do here as well. And then for the accent, I went with the Imperial Plastoid black color. And then I turned the polish all the way down to 0 so that it wasn't shiny. And then for the grip, I went with the textured black rubber because I really like the look of rubber on the handles. I think it makes sense for a lightsaber to have a rubber grip like this. That way it's, easy to grip. And then for the conditioning, I like to give this thing a little bit of wear and tear, and I'll put it on the worn category. It looks fine being pristine, but every lightsaber is different, and I think this lightsaber looks a little bit better with some wear and tear, and you can tell it's been beat up quite a number of times. So next up is a unique one, and it was a pretty fun one to make, and it's the Beskar saber. Now, if you didn't know, one of the lightsaber materials you could use in this game is actually Beskar steel. So I figured why not make just an absolutely deadly looking lightsaber made completely out of Beskar. And the thought process behind this lightsaber is if the entire lightsaber is made out of Beskar, then obviously it's going to be pretty indestructible. And therefore you could just use this lightsaber to bash people over the head or something with it. I gave it some blades and stuff. That way this lightsaber hilt is a little bit multi-purpose. If for some reason you didn't want to kill someone with your lightsaber and you just wanted to bash them with the handle, well, that's kind of the purpose of this lightsaber. So jumping into the individual components, for the emitter, I went with the Justice emitter because it has this long blade on it and I really like the look of that blade. And then I went with the Duelist vents because they're pretty big and bulky. And then I went with the Duelist switch because it has this long piece at the bottom, which also kind of looks like a blade. So I wanted to go with a look where at the end of the lightsaber, I had some blades all around it. And then for the grips, I went with two Digilance grips and the Digilance pommel. Now the reason I went with this pommel in the middle is because it's the only one that wasn't affected by the Beskar steel. Every pommel option goes with the primary color option, but I wanted it to look different, so I went with a silver, and I feel like it looks really good with that handle. Then I went with the Duelist switch again and the Justice emitter, just like the front part of the lightsaber. And then for the final pommel, I went with the Duelist pommel because it looks pretty sharp and deadly. That way, when you're using the crossguard saber, if you needed to reach behind you and just jab someone from behind, you can do that with that sharp pointy end. And then for me personally, with this lightsaber, I like to use the white blade. I feel like the white goes really well with the Beskar. And then for the primary color, I obviously went with Beskar steel. And then for the secondary color, it is also Beskar steel. And then for the accent, I went with a metal alloy or just any type of silver will do. But I really like the look of having a silver accent. And then for the grip, I went with the textured black rubber again. And then for the conditioning, I feel like any sort of conditioning works pretty well with this lightsaber. Some wear and tear actually fits the vibe of this lightsaber that I was going for. And I just really like the way that this thing turned out because it's completely made of Beskar steel and it looks like you could use this as a deadly weapon on its own without even needing to turn on the lightsaber. So for the next lightsaber on our list, I wanted to stick with the theme of the game and go with an Old Republic / High Republic looking lightsaber. So this one's a pretty basic one, but it has this old High Republic feel to it, and I just really like the clean look of this saber. So to make this, the very first part is the Jaro DePaul emitter. It's pretty plain and simple. The second part is the Santari Kree vents because they have this nice little curve to them. I think this goes really well with this saber design. For the switch, I went with the Santari Kree switch because it has this like little symbol on it, and I think that looks pretty cool with this design. Then I went with the Santari Kree grip, the Jaro DePaul pommel, the Santari Kree grip again, the Santari Kree switch, and then the Jaro DePaul emitter. And then for the final pommel, I went with the Patience pommel. So this saber is just basically just a mixture of the Santari Kree and the Jaro DePaul sabers. And I gotta say, I really like how this lightsaber ended up turning out. So for the materials of this lightsaber, I went with the Imperial Chrome lightsaber, but yet again, you can use any silver for this lightsaber and it will look just as good. So I went with Imperial Chrome for the primary. For the secondary, I went with two-tone dark because the two-tone dark gives you this little like bronze or gold outline to the black. I think that looks really good and it gives it a little bit of definition, so I went with two-tone dark there. For the accent, I also went with two-tone dark, but honestly the accent doesn't really matter too much for this lightsaber. You can't really tell much of a difference, but so I just kept it two-tone dark for here. And then for the grip, I yet again went with textured black rubber because I just really like the look of these dark rubber handles. I think it looks good with pretty much every lightsaber. And then for the conditioning, I kept this one pristine because this lightsaber looks pretty rough if you add some wear and tear to it. The ancient version of this lightsaber looks pretty rough, so I like to keep this one as close to pristine as possible. Then for the blade, since this is a High Republic kind of lightsaber, I like to go with the orange or the yellow. So the next lightsaber on my list is kind of cheating, but I'm going to be using the entirety of the Edgehawk lightsaber. I am just a sucker for this lightsaber. This is probably my favorite design in the entire game. I absolutely love this. This lightsaber design just has like an Empire vibe to it. I don't really know how to explain it, but I really love the design of the Edgehawk saber. So I kept all the parts, the Edgehawk parts, every single part here is of Edgehawk design. And then for the materials, the primary material, I went for Imperial Chrome because I really like the shininess of the chrome. I think it just looks really good. Then the secondary color, I went with Imperial Plastoid Black because the secondary color really makes this weapon pop. So if you wanted to go with a different color like red, for example, it will just completely change the look of this saber. But I like to go with the black personally. Then for the accent, I also like to go with Imperial Chrome. This also has a pretty big impact on the way the saber looks, so you can get really crazy with the individual parts of this saber, but I like to make this chrome as well. And then for the grip, I'm switching it up this time, and I'm not going with rubber. I'm actually going with the Gora Slug leather. So we're going with some leather grips this time instead of rubber, and I really like the look of this too. It's a nice dark looking black / gray, and I think it makes this whole lightsaber pop. Just the gray and the black grips just makes this look like an evil style lightsaber to me, and it just looks like a lightsaber that either some sort of Sith or the Empire or somebody bad would just come up with this lightsaber design. So I really like the look of this. It's one of my favorites in the entire game, and I think you guys are definitely going to like it. So the next lightsaber on the list is another one of plain design, and sometimes the plainer the lightsaber, the better. Some of the plain looking lightsabers are some of my favorites, and for this lightsaber I like to go with the hunter handles. That way you have some bones sticking out of the hilts. I think that looks really cool, and it's a pretty nice touch. So to make this lightsaber, the emitter is going to be the Temperance emitter. It's just a nice, simple, basic looking emitter. Then I went for the Jar of Tapal vents for when you use the crossguard stance. Then I went with the Jar of Tapal emitter. Then for the grip, I went with the Hunter grip, and then I went with the Hunter pommel. That way you have this little bone sticking out the end. I think that looks really neat. Then I went with the Hunter grip again for the same reason. Then I went with Jar of Tapal again, and the Temperance emitter again. And then for the final pommel, I yet again went with the Hunter pommel. That way you just have this giant bone sticking out the end of your lightsaber, and it looks really cool when you use the crossguard stance. It's just this big, beefy looking bone that you could use to maybe stab somebody or something. And then for the materials, I yet again went with the Imperial colors, and I went with the Imperial alloy this time. I think that's a nice looking grayish silver. And then for the secondary color, I decided to go with the Gore Slug leather this time, because for this weapon, the secondary color actually changes some of the grip texture, and I wanted the grips to look a little bit darker. So I went with the leather there. I think it makes it pop pretty well, and it looks pretty good. And then for the accent, I went with the Imperial colors again, and I went with the Imperial alloy again, because on this lightsaber, the accent is actually pretty important to changing the overall vibe of the lightsaber, so I kept it the same and kept it Imperial alloy. And then for the grips, I actually went with wood. So I went with the wood category, and I just picked the very first wood option, but I mean, you can play around with it and make it look however you want. I just stuck with the very first wood option. And then to me, the wood looks a little bit too shiny, so I turned down the polish a little bit. But if you turn it down too low, then the wood starts to look a little bit worn, and I don't like that as much. So I like to keep the polish at like 65-ish%. I think that looks pretty good. And then for this lightsaber, you definitely want to keep it pristine, because if you add any wear and tear to this lightsaber, it looks rough. If you put it clear down to ancient, I mean, the wood just looks rotten. The leather looks rotten. Like, this whole lightsaber just looks rotten and disgusting. So I wouldn't put this on ancient unless you wanted to go with like a really disgusting looking lightsaber. So for me, I keep it pristine, or maybe a little bit of wear and tear with some well kept. But I like to keep it nice and pristine because I think that looks the best. And then the next lightsaber on my list is a really fun one that I'm personally going to be using on my new game plus with the red blade, because I'm calling this one the Evil Saber. Now I think it's really fun to design these evil looking lightsabers for like Sith type characters, because you know, sometimes you just want to play as a bad guy. And I really like the way that this one turned out, especially when you use the crossguard stance. I really like the lights and the jaggedness of the emitter and the pointy edge at the very end. I mean, there's something about this lightsaber that just looks kind of scary. So to make this lightsaber, for the emitter, I went with the detachment emitter, obviously because it looks pretty jagged at the end, and if you got jabbed with this, it would definitely hurt / kill you. I mean, this thing's a pretty intimidating emitter. Then I went with the Edgehawk vents because they are some of the tallest, and I feel like they look really good with this design. And they have both primary and secondary color options, so if you want to get crazy with the colors, this is a good vent to have. Then I went with the Justice switch. Now there's a number of different switches that actually go well with this lightsaber design, but I really like how the switch and the vents go together when this is in the crossguard stance. But honestly, you can play around with any of the switches and this lightsaber will look pretty good, especially any of them with any of the light up lights. I think that'll make this lightsaber pop. But we're sticking with the Justice switch. Then for the grips, I went with these Serenity grips because they have all these lights in the middle, and that really makes this lightsaber pop. I really like the look of those lights. Then I went with the Justice pommel because it has two little lights on the pommel, and I like the fact that it lights up and, you know, it adds some character. I went with the Serenity grip again for the second part. And then for the second switch, I went with the Serenity switch because it has a little button on it that is lit up, and I think that looks cool. For the second emitter, obviously I went with the detachment emitter again. And then for the final pommel, I went with the Duelist pommel because it's got that jagged edge at the end of it, and it just looks pretty deadly and scary. And then next up is the materials. The primary color, I yet again went with the Imperial alloy. It's like a nice dark looking grayish color, but I also think that any sort of chrome or silver looks really good with this lightsaber design as well. But I'm sticking with the Imperial alloy. The secondary color is the Imperial Plastoid Black, but any black will do. For example, there's the Hard Plastoid Black. I think the Hard Plastic Black looks pretty good on this lightsaber too. But if you're going to use the Imperial Black, I would turn the polish down a little bit, because if you have the polish up all the way, it just looks a little bit too shiny. So I turned the polish down to about 65. And then for the accent, I went with the Imperial Alloy again. Now the accent on this lightsaber actually changes the button. So whatever color you want the power button to be on this lightsaber design is what you want to make the accent color be. So if you want the accent to be blue or red or green or whatever, that's what you're going to do here. But for me, I just made it Imperial Alloy. I just kept it with the same gray feeling. And then with the grips, I went with the textured black rubber again, because I really like the look of the black / dark gray grips. But you can also go with the Gora Slug leather too. I mean, they both look pretty similar with this design, so either one can be interchangeable. And then for the conditioning of this lightsaber, I actually like to keep it well kept, because I feel like a little bit of aging really brings this lightsaber together. When it's on pristine, I mean, it looks good. It just looks a little bit too shiny in my opinion. So I like to add a little bit of wear and tear on this and put it on well kept. But honestly, I feel like this lightsaber design looks good at any condition. And then the final lightsaber on today's list, I like to call the Simple Saber. Now, I was trying to base it kind of off of Palpatine or Mace Windu's lightsaber, and I decided to go with the black, silver, and gold option here. Now, I couldn't really decide on the emitter. There's 3 different emitters that I really like with this lightsaber design that I feel all go really well together. There's the Centauri Kree emitter. I think that looks really good. And then there's the Hermit emitter. I feel like that looks pretty basic and good as well. And then the final emitter that I like with this lightsaber is the Harmony emitter. I feel like all 3 choices are great with this lightsaber design, and all 3 look unique and pretty simple. But for this video, I'm going to be sticking with the Centauri Kree emitter, because I really like the gold up at the top of it. So moving on to the vents, I went with Jaro de Paul yet again, because it has the primary and secondary color options together. For the switch, I went with the Harmony switch, because it has those little lights up at the top, and I think that looks really good. And it also has the primary and secondary color options on this switch. Then for the grips, I went with the Hermit grips from the Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber. I think that looks really good here. And then for the pommel, I went with the Patience pommel, because it has multiple color options. So your secondary and primary colors are going to look really well on this Patience pommel. Then I went with the Hermit grips again, and the Harmony switch again, and then the same emitter as before, which is the Centauri Kree emitter. And then the final pommel piece is the Harmony pommel piece. So this whole lightsaber set looks pretty good, especially when you're like dual wielding, or even when you combined it into one piece and you have a double bladed saber. I think that looks good too. And then it also looks good when you have the cross guard. So every version of this lightsaber I think looks pretty clean, and I just really like how this design turned out. So for the color options, I actually went with a Hard Plastoid Black. I really like the texture of just the graininess of the plastic here. I think that looks good, but honestly, kind of any black will do, as long as you don't make it that shiny and you take off some of the polish. But here I'm sticking with the Hard Plastoid Black. Then for the secondary color option, I went with the Worn Metal category, and I picked the Pitted Chromium, because the Pitted Chromium just gives it a little bit of like dents and wear and tear, and it looks a little bit worn out, so I really like the look of that. Then for the accent, I went with the Worn Metal category again, and I picked the gold option. Just any sort of gold or bronze will do here. I think that looks good. Then for the grips, I picked the Pitted Chromium option again. That way it matches the rest of the lightsaber design. Then for the conditioning, it doesn't matter too much for this saber. I think it looks good in pristine condition, but since I went with the Pitted Chromium option and it looks a little bit worn out anyway, you can easily add some aging to it and it still looks completely fine. So those are all of my favorite lightsaber designs so far in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. These are some of the best options I was able to come up with, so hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you guys enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated. Let me know what your guys' favorite lightsaber designs are down in the comment section down below. And if you guys really enjoyed this video, then I'll consider making a part 2. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. That way you guys don't miss out on any future Star Wars Jedi Survivor videos. And that is going to do it for me, everyone. And I will talk to you guys next time.